The Great Hall of the Ascendancy's diplomatic station was the most beautiful place Commander Yuki Tanaka had ever seen. Golden pillars rose toward a ceiling painted with stars. White marble floors stretched in every direction, polished so perfectly that she could see her own reflection. Delegates from 100 different worlds stood in small groups, speaking in languages she did not understand. Yuki was 53 years old. She had served in the Terran Navy for 30 years. She had fought pirates in the Outer Reach. She had negotiated peace between colony worlds that wanted to destroy each other. She had received medals and honors and the respect of her peers. But standing here, in the heart of the Galactic Ascendancy, she felt very small. The Ascendancy had ruled this part of the galaxy for 6,000 years. 12 elder species had joined together to form an empire that stretched across 10,000 star systems. They had conquered worlds beyond counting. They had built wonders that humans could barely imagine. And they had always looked at humanity the way a person might look at an insect, sometimes curious, usually annoyed, never impressed. 900 years ago, when human ships first ventured beyond their own solar system, the Ascendancy had given them a choice. Sign the Treaty of Valanthos and accept their place as a minor species under Ascendancy protection, or be destroyed. Humanity had signed. For 9 centuries, humans had paid tribute to the Ascendancy. They had bowed their heads. They had accepted insults and unfair treatment. They had watched the Ascendancy take resources from worlds that could have been human colonies. They had swallowed their pride again and again because the alternative was extinction. Today was the annual renewal ceremony when representatives from all treaty species came to reaffirm their loyalty. Yuki had been chosen to represent Earth. It was supposed to be an honor. It was supposed to be routine. She carried a small crystal box in her hands. Inside was a data archive containing the finest achievements of human culture, music that had moved billions to tears, literature that had shaped civilizations, scientific discoveries that had changed everything. It was humanity's gift to the Ascendancy, a symbol of respect and cooperation. The High Arbiter sat on a throne at the far end of the hall. His name was Kethvalar, and he was Drenix, one of the founding species of the Ascendancy. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with scales the color of dark emeralds and eyes like burning gold. Jewels covered his ceremonial robes. Claws as long as knives extended from his fingers. The Drenix had ruled the Ascendancy since its founding. They believed they were the superior species in the galaxy. They treated everyone else, even their own allies, as lesser beings. One by one, the delegates approached the throne. Each one knelt before Kethvalar. Each one offered their tribute. Each one spoke words of loyalty and submission. The High Arbiter barely acknowledged them. Sometimes he waved a hand in dismissal before they had finished speaking. Sometimes he made comments that drew laughter from his attendants, cruel jokes at the expense of species who could not fight back. Yuki watched and felt something cold growing in her chest. It was not fear. She had faced death many times and had never been afraid. This was something else. This was anger, old and deep, the anger of 900 years of humiliation. But she pushed it down. She had a duty. She had been trained for this. She would do what was expected and then she would go home. Finally, it was her turn. She walked across the marble floor, her boots clicking in the silence. Every eye in the hall was on her. The human, the representative of that young, foolish species that had barely learned to travel between stars. She stopped at the proper distance from the throne. She did not kneel. The treaty did not require it, only a bow of the head. She bowed as she had been instructed and held out the crystal box. "High Arbiter," she said, her voice steady. "I bring greetings from the Terran Confederation. We offer this gift as a symbol of our continued friendship and cooperation." Kethvalar looked at her. His golden eyes moved slowly over her face, her uniform, the box in her hands. His expression showed nothing but contempt. "Friendship," he repeated. The word sounded like poison in his mouth. cooperation. He did not reach for the gift. Instead, he rose from his throne. He was enormous, towering over her like a mountain. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing through the silent hall. He stopped directly in front of her, so close that she could smell the strange, sharp scent of his scales. "You humans," he said softly, "have always presumed too much. You come into these halls as if you were our equals. You speak to us as if your words had meaning. You offer gifts as if you had anything we could possibly want." Yuki said nothing. Her heart was beating fast, but her face remained calm. "Perhaps," Kethvalar continued, "you need a reminder of your place." He moved faster than she could react. His clawed hand swung in a vicious arc and struck her across the face. The blow was devastating. Yuki felt bones crack. She felt her skin tear. She felt herself falling, the world spinning around her, and then she hit the marble floor hard enough to drive the breath from her lungs. Blood poured from her ruined cheek. It splattered across the white stone, bright red against perfect white. The crystal box had fallen from her hands and shattered, scattering data chips across the floor. The hall was completely silent. Delegates from 100 worlds stared in shock. No one moved. No one spoke. Yuki lay on the cold marble, her face burning with pain, her blood pooling beneath her. She could feel the eyes of the galaxy upon her. She knew what they expected. They expected her to stay down. They expected her to beg for forgiveness. They expected her to crawl. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up, first to her hands and knees, then, with tremendous effort, to her feet. She swayed but did not fall. Blood ran down her face and dripped from her chin. One eye was already swelling shut, but she stood. Kethvalar watched her with something that might have been surprise. "You should kneel," he said. "Kneel, and perhaps I will be merciful." Yuki raised her head. She looked directly into his golden eyes. And then, despite the pain, despite the blood, despite everything, she smiled. "No," she said quietly. The word hung in the air like a thunderclap. Kethvalar's eyes widened. In 6,000 years, no one had ever refused him. Not like this. Not with blood on their face and death in their eyes. "Then you will die," he said, "and your species will follow." Yuki's smile did not waver. "Perhaps," she said, "but not today and not by your hand." She turned her back on him, an insult beyond measure, and walked toward the exit. Her boots left bloody footprints on the marble floor. She did not look back. Behind her, the High Arbiter began to laugh. It was a cold, cruel sound that echoed through the hall. He did not understand what he had done. He did not understand that the blood on that floor was not a humiliation. It was a declaration of war. The video spread across human space like fire through dry grass. Someone in the diplomatic hall had been recording. Perhaps one of the other delegates, perhaps a servant. It did not matter who. What mattered was that within hours, every human being in the galaxy had seen it. They saw Yuki Tanaka standing proud in her uniform. They saw her offer a gift with dignity and respect. They saw the High Arbiter rise from his throne. They saw the blow that shattered her face. They saw her fall. And they saw her rise. They saw her smile with blood running down her chin. They heard her say that single word, "No," and they felt something stir inside them, something that had been sleeping for 900 years. On Earth, people gathered in the streets. On colony worlds from Alpha Centauri to the edge of explored space, humans stopped what they were doing and watched the video again and again. They watched it in silence. They watched it with tears in their eyes. They watched it with fists clenched and jaws tight. For 9 centuries, humanity had accepted humiliation. They had told themselves it was necessary. They had told themselves it was wisdom. They had told themselves that survival was more important than pride. But there is a limit to what any species can endure. There is a moment when survival stops being enough. There is a breaking point. Yuki Tanaka's blood on that white marble floor was the breaking point. The Terran Parliament met in emergency session 12 hours after the incident. The chamber was packed. Every seat was filled. Representatives from 200 colony worlds had come, some traveling through fold space for days to be present. President Chen Weilin stood at the central podium. She was 67 years old, a former admiral who had spent her life in service to humanity. Her hair was white, her face was lined, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She waited until the chamber was completely silent. Then she spoke. "I will not waste time on speeches," she said. "You have all seen what happened. You have all felt what I felt when I watched it. There is only one question that matters now. What do we do?" A voice called out from the assembly. "What can we do? The Ascendancy has 40,000 warships. We have less than 1,000. If we fight, we die." President Chen nodded slowly. "That is what they believe," she said. "That is what they have always believed. That is why the High Arbiter felt safe to strike one of our officers in front of the entire galaxy, because he thinks he knows, that we cannot fight back." She paused and looked around the chamber. "He is wrong." A murmur ran through the assembly. Chen raised her hand for silence. 900 years ago, our ancestors signed the Treaty of Valanthos. They did it because they had no choice. They were few and the Ascendancy was vast. They did what they had to do to survive. But they were not fools. They knew that peace bought with submission is not true peace. They knew that one day humanity would need to stand on its own. She pressed a button on the podium. Behind her, a holographic display came to life. "This is what the Ascendancy knows about our military strength," she said. The display showed a map of human space, 200 worlds scattered across a modest region of the galaxy. Small numbers appeared next to various locations. 847 combat vessels, 12 major shipyards, a population of 47 billion. By their calculations, we are not even worth conquering. We are simply insignificant. She pressed another button. The display changed. The numbers changed. The chamber fell completely silent. "This," President Chen said quietly, "is the truth." The map now showed something very different. Hidden shipyards in asteroid belts. Secret factories on moons that the Ascendancy had never bothered to survey. Underground facilities on worlds that appeared to be empty. And ships, thousands upon thousands of ships, built in silence over centuries, waiting in the darkness of space. 12,000 combat vessels, Chen said. Not 800, 12,000. Most of them more advanced than anything the Ascendancy has ever seen. She let that sink in. Our ancestors knew that peace would not last forever. They knew that one day humanity would have to fight. So while we smiled and bowed and paid tribute, we also prepared. We built shipyards where no one would look. We developed technologies that we kept hidden. We trained soldiers in secret facilities on worlds without names. She looked around the chamber, and her eyes were burning. For 900 years we have been waiting. For 900 years we have been building. For 900 years we have been getting ready for this moment. And now that moment has come. She took a deep breath. "I'm not going to ask you to vote for war. War is coming whether we vote for it or not. The High Arbiter struck our officer in front of 100 delegations. He did it to send a message that humanity can be beaten, broken, humiliated without consequence. If we do nothing, that message will spread. Every species in the galaxy will know that humans can be attacked without fear." Her voice hardened. "But if we respond, if we show the galaxy that humanity will not kneel, then the message changes. Then every species that has ever suffered under the Ascendancy will see that the Empire can be challenged. Then everything changes." She stepped back from the podium. "The vote is simple. Do we withdraw from the Treaty of Valanthos? Do we tell the Ascendancy that the era of submission is over? Do we finally, after 900 years, stand up?" The vote was unanimous. Within 24 hours, the Terran Confederation formally withdrew from the treaty. The message sent to the Ascendancy was short and direct. The Treaty of Valanthos is terminated. Humanity will no longer accept the status of a subject species. Any attack on human territory or human citizens will be considered an act of war and will be met with full force. Within 48 hours, all Ascendancy personnel in human space were given safe passage to the border and escorted out. There was no violence. There was no anger, just quiet efficiency. Within 72 hours, the border between human space and Ascendancy territory went dark. No ships crossed. No communications passed. A wall of silence fell between the two civilizations. In the great halls of the Ascendancy, High Arbiter Kethvalar received the news with amusement. The humans had withdrawn from the treaty. How amusing. How foolish. Did they really think their few hundred ships could stand against the might of the Empire? He ordered a fleet to be assembled. 20 battle groups, nearly 1,000 ships, more than enough to crush any resistance and remind humanity of its place. The fleet gathered at the border and prepared to advance. They had no idea what was waiting for them. On the bridge of the TCS Remembrance, Admiral Yuki Tanaka, promoted 3 times in as many weeks, watched the Ascendancy fleet approach. Her face was still bandaged. The doctors had offered to heal her completely, to remove every trace of the injury. She had refused. The scar would remind her. It would remind everyone. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, "The Ascendancy fleet is crossing the border." Yuki nodded. She looked at the display showing her own forces, not the 800 ships the enemy expected, but 12,000, hiding in the darkness between stars. "Good," she said quietly, "let them come." She smiled, and it was the same smile she had shown the High Arbiter, the smile of someone who had nothing left to lose. It is time to show the galaxy what humanity can do. Fleet Commander Vorath of the Dreeniks watched the human border approach on his tactical display. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, led 20 battle groups into what he expected to be a simple operation. Nearly 1,000 warships followed behind him, each one capable of destroying a planet. He was not worried. Why would he be? The humans had a few hundred outdated vessels at best. This would not be a battle, it would be an execution. "Commander," his sensor officer reported, "we are detecting human ships ahead, approximately 300 vessels." Vorath made a sound of contempt. 300. They send 300 ships against 1,000. The humans are even more foolish than I thought. "Should we attempt communication, Commander? Perhaps they wish to surrender." No, High Arbiter Kethvalar was clear. No negotiations, no mercy. We will destroy their fleet, then burn their colonies, then reduce Earth to ash. Let this be a lesson to every species in the galaxy. The Ascendancy fleet advanced. The gap between the two forces narrowed, 10,000 kilometers, then 5,000, then 1,000. Vorath could see the human ships clearly now on his display. They were small compared to his battle cruisers, fragile-looking. "All ships," he ordered, "prepare to fire on my command." And then, without any warning, space itself seemed to tear apart. Ships appeared from nowhere. They emerged from behind moons, from within asteroid fields, from the shadows of gas giants. They dropped out of fold space in waves, each wave larger than the last. Human ships, thousands of them, materializing all around the Ascendancy fleet like ghosts becoming solid. Vorath stared at his display in disbelief. The numbers kept climbing. 500 ships, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. The human fleet surrounded his forces completely, forming a sphere of death with no escape route. "That is not possible," he whispered. "Our intelligence said." His intelligence had been wrong, catastrophically wrong. For 900 years, the Ascendancy had monitored humanity. They had counted human ships, mapped human bases, assessed human technology. They had concluded that humanity was weak, primitive, insignificant. They had never thought to look deeper. They had never imagined that humans might be hiding their true strength. "Commander," his tactical officer shouted, "we are being targeted by." The officer's voice trailed off. "I do not understand these readings. Their weapons systems do not match any known technology." Voreth felt cold fear grip his heart for the first time in his long life. All ships, defensive formation, raise shields to maximum. But it was already too late. The human fleet opened fire. The weapons they used were nothing the Ascendancy had ever seen. The Empire's technology was 6,000 years old, refined and improved over millennia. But based on the same fundamental principles: plasma cannons, kinetic accelerators, energy shields, proven technologies that had crushed 100 species. Human weapons were different. Beams of light that ignored shields completely, passing through them as if they did not exist. Missiles that changed direction faster than any tracking system could follow. Pulses of energy that shut down power systems across entire battle groups. Weapons that bent space itself, crushing ships like empty cans. The Ascendancy fleet began to die. Ship after ship exploded in the darkness. Voreth watched his tactical display turn red with casualties. 20 ships lost, 50, 100. His forces were being slaughtered and they could not even hit back. Human vessels moved with impossible speed, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable. "Return fire," Voreth screamed. "All ships return fire." His ships fired their weapons. Thousands of plasma bolts and kinetic rounds streaked toward the human fleet, and the humans did something impossible. They shot down every single one. Point defense systems on human ships tracked and destroyed incoming fire with perfect accuracy. Not a single human vessel was damaged. Not one. It was as if the Ascendancy was throwing rocks at a fortress made of steel. The battle, if it could be called a battle, lasted 9 minutes. When it was over, 947 Ascendancy warships had been reduced to debris. The Eternal Dominion drifted alone in space, its weapons destroyed, its engines dead, its shields gone. Voreth stood on his bridge surrounded by the bodies of his crew and watched a human ship approach. A voice came over the communication system. It was calm, almost gentle. "This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the Terran Confederation ship Remembrance. Your fleet has been destroyed. Your ship is disabled. You have one chance to surrender and be treated as prisoners of war according to the conventions of civilized species." Voreth wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight to the death, to show these humans that the Dreeniks did not submit. But looking at the destruction around him, looking at the human fleet that had barely suffered a scratch, he understood something terrible. This was not a war the Ascendancy could win. "I surrender," he said, the words like poison in his mouth. Within hours, news of the battle reached the Ascendancy homeworlds. The reports were met with disbelief. 1,000 ships destroyed in 9 minutes. Impossible. Human technology superior to the Empire's. Absurd. There must be some mistake. There was no mistake. High Arbiter Kethvalar received the news in his throne room. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he issued orders for the largest fleet ever assembled in Ascendancy history. 30,000 warships from across the Empire would gather and crush the human threat once and for all. But the humans did not wait to be attacked. Over the following weeks, human fleets struck across Ascendancy space. They appeared without warning, destroyed military targets, and vanished before counterattacks could be organized. They moved faster than anyone thought possible, using fold space technology that left Ascendancy navigators baffled. And wherever they went, they broadcast the same message. The Ascendancy is not invincible. They can be defeated. They can be beaten. If humanity can stand against them, so can you. The message spread through the Empire like a virus. Slave species who had suffered for millennia heard it and began to hope. Subject worlds that had been crushed into obedience heard it and began to whisper. Even member species of the Ascendancy itself heard it and began to wonder if they had chosen the wrong side. In the throne room of the Dreenix homeworld, Kethfeller raged against the humans, against his own commanders, against fate itself. He did not understand how this had happened. He did not understand how a species he had dismissed as insects could be tearing his empire apart. He did not understand that this was exactly what humans did. They survived, they adapted, they waited, and when the moment came, they struck with everything they had. 900 years of humiliation. 900 years of preparation. 900 years of patience. And now the bill had come due. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Tanaka studied reports from across the war zone. Human casualties were minimal. Ascendancy losses were catastrophic. The Empire was reeling, unable to understand how its greatest military force had been neutralized so completely. Her tactical officer approached with a new report. "Admiral, we are receiving communications from the Velith and the Krix and a dozen other subject species. They want to know if the message is true. They want to know if we can really win." Tanaka looked at the report for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Tell them yes," she said. "Tell them that the era of the Ascendancy is ending. And tell them that if they want to help write the next chapter of history, humanity will welcome them as allies." The tactical officer nodded and left to send the message. Tanaka turned back to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, species that had been oppressed for millennia were hearing that freedom was possible. Somewhere out there, the foundations of a galactic empire were beginning to crack. The war had only just begun. But humanity had already won the most important battle of all. They had shown the galaxy that hope was not dead. The war burned across the galaxy for 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days. It should have been over quickly. The Ascendancy had resources that humanity could never match: thousands of worlds, trillions of citizens, countless ships and soldiers. They had conquered 100 species. They had crushed rebellions that seemed unstoppable. They had ruled for 6,000 years. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. Human fleets refused to fight the way wars were supposed to be fought. They did not line up for honorable battle. They did not defend territory until the last ship was destroyed. They did not follow the rules that the Ascendancy had established over millennia. Instead, they attacked supply lines. They destroyed communication relays. They struck at vulnerable points and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. They turned the Ascendancy's own size against it. The Empire was so large that it could not defend everything, and humans seemed to know exactly where to hit. Admiral Tanaka led the main human fleet from the Bridge of the Remembrance. She had recovered fully from her injuries, though she still carried the scar on her face. She had become a symbol to humanity and to the galaxy, the woman who had refused to kneel, the admiral who had broken the Ascendancy's invincible reputation. In the 3rd month of the war, she received a message that changed everything. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission from the Velith homeworld. They say they are rising up. They are attacking Ascendancy forces on their planet. They are asking for our help." The Velith had been conquered by the Ascendancy 8,000 years ago. For 80 centuries, they had served as slaves and soldiers, forced to fight in wars that meant nothing to them. They had been broken so thoroughly that most Ascendancy citizens forgot they had ever been free. Now they were remembering. Tanaka immediately ordered a fleet to Velith space. When human ships arrived, they found the Velith fighting with whatever weapons they could find: stolen rifles, improvised explosives, even their bare hands. They were dying by the thousands, but they would not stop. Human forces joined the battle. Within a week, the Ascendancy garrison on the Velith homeworld had been destroyed. For the first time in 8,000 years, the Velith were free. But it did not stop there. The Krix were next. Their original homeworld had been destroyed 2,000 years ago as punishment for rebellion. The survivors had scattered to hidden colonies in deep space, living in the darkness, waiting for a chance at revenge. When they saw that humanity could fight the Ascendancy and win, they emerged from hiding with ships they had been building in secret for centuries. Then the Morath rose up on a dozen worlds simultaneously. Then the Syndicate, a network of species that had cooperated quietly for generations, declared open war on the Empire. Then the Hollow Ones, beings of pure energy who had been imprisoned in containment fields for millennia, were freed by human commandos and joined the fight. The Ascendancy was no longer fighting one enemy, they were fighting everyone. High Arbiter Kethvalar watched his empire crumble from his throne room. Reports came in daily, another world lost, another fleet destroyed, another species turning against them. His advisors told him to negotiate, to offer peace terms, to save what could be saved. He refused. The Dreenics did not surrender, the Dreenics did not compromise. They conquered or they died. In the second year of the war, Kethvalar assembled the largest fleet in Ascendancy history. 30,000 warships from every corner of the Empire gathered to strike at Earth itself. If they could destroy the human homeworld, he believed, the rebellion would collapse. Without humanity to inspire them, the subject species would return to obedience. The fleet advanced toward Earth. Human forces moved to intercept. The fate of the galaxy would be decided in a single battle. Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Remembrance as Earth appeared on the viewscreen behind her. The blue-green world hung in space like a jewel, orbited by stations and satellites that represented everything humanity had built over 10,000 years of civilization. She looked at the approaching Ascendancy fleet. 30,000 ships, far more than humanity could match alone. But humanity was not alone, not anymore. Ships from the Velith, the Krix, the Morath, the Syndicate, and a dozen other species had joined the human fleet. Beings who had been enemies for millennia now fought side by side against a common oppressor. The combined fleet was still outnumbered, but numbers alone do not win wars. "Open a channel to all ships," Tanaka ordered. Her voice went out to every vessel in the fleet, human and alien alike. 3 years ago, I stood in the throne room of the Ascendancy and was struck down for daring to stand tall. They wanted me to kneel. I refused. Today, we all refuse together. She paused. The enemy believes they are fighting to preserve their empire. They believe they are fighting for power, for glory, for dominance. They are wrong. They have already lost, not because our ships are stronger or our weapons more advanced, though they are. They have lost because they are fighting for something that cannot last. She looked at the display showing the Allied fleet, hundreds of species, once divided, now united. We are not fighting for empire. We are not fighting for revenge. We are fighting for the right of every species in this galaxy to stand on their own feet, to reach for the stars, to become what they are capable of becoming. That is something worth dying for. That is something worth killing for. Her voice hardened. Today, we end the Ascendancy. Today, we free the galaxy. Today, we show every tyrant who might come after them that there will always be someone willing to stand up and say no. She raised her hand. All ships attack. The battle lasted 14 hours. It was the largest naval engagement in galactic history. Ships died by the thousands on both sides. Entire species lost their last vessels. Heroes rose and fell in moments that would be remembered for millennia. When it was over, the Ascendancy fleet had been destroyed. Human losses were severe, nearly 4,000 ships gone, millions dead. The allied species had suffered equally, but the Ascendancy had lost everything. Their grand fleet was debris. Their military power was broken. Their subject species had risen against them across the galaxy. 6 months later, the Dreenics' homeworld fell. Kethvalar died in his throne room, killed by his own guards who no longer wished to serve a losing cause. The Ascendancy, which had ruled for 6,000 years, ceased to exist. Admiral Tanaka was there when the last ascendancy flag was lowered. She stood in the same throne room where she had been struck, looking at the same marble floor that had once been stained with her blood. The floor had been cleaned, but she could still see the spot where she had fallen. A Velith commander approached her. His species had suffered more than most under the ascendancy, and they had fought harder than most to bring it down. "Admiral," he said, "my people wish to thank humanity. You gave us hope when we had none. You showed us that resistance was possible. We owe you everything." Tanaka shook her head. "You owe us nothing. You freed yourselves. We just showed you that it could be done." The Velith considered this for a moment. Then he asked the question that everyone was asking, the question that would shape the future of the galaxy. "What happens now? The ascendancy is gone. Someone must lead. Someone must maintain order. Will it be humanity?" Tanaka looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked around the throne room, at the golden pillars, the painted ceiling, the symbols of an empire that had crushed so many for so long. "No," she said, "not like this, not from a throne." She turned and walked away from the seat of power that had been the center of galactic tyranny for 6,000 years. "Humanity does not want to rule. We want something better, and we will build it together." 5 years after the fall of the ascendancy, representatives from 37 species gathered on Earth to sign a new treaty. The location was chosen carefully. Not a throne room, not a palace, not a monument to power or conquest. Instead, they met in a simple building in Geneva, a city known for centuries as a place where different peoples came together to talk instead of fight. Yuki Tanaka stood at the window of the conference hall, watching ships descend through Earth's atmosphere. Each ship carried delegates from a different species, some who had been slaves under the ascendancy, some who had been masters, some who had hidden in the shadows waiting for a chance to emerge. They came from every corner of the galaxy, united by a war they had fought together and a future they hoped to build. She was 63 years old now. Her hair had turned gray at the temples. Lines marked her face, lines of worry, lines of grief, lines of laughter. The scar on her cheek had faded to a thin white mark, barely visible unless you knew to look for it. She had been offered many titles in the years since the war: Supreme Commander, Galactic President, Empress of the Stars. She had refused them all. She had seen what power did to those who held it. She had seen the throne room of the ascendancy, built on the bones of conquered worlds. She wanted something different. The delegates began to arrive. The Velith came first, tall, graceful beings with silver skin and eyes like starlight. They had rebuilt their civilization from the ruins of slavery and had become one of humanity's closest allies. Their leader, a female named Shara who had lost her entire family in the uprising, embraced Tanaka like a sister. The Krix arrived next, warriors with 4 arms and faces that showed no emotion. They had spent 2,000 years in hiding, preparing for revenge. Now they were learning that there were better things to live for than hatred. Their commander nodded to Tanaka with deep respect. Then came the Morath, the Syndicate, the Hollow Ones, and dozens of others. Species that had been enemies now sat at the same table. Species that had never met now introduced themselves. The room filled with beings of every shape and size, speaking languages that translation devices struggled to interpret. And among them, scattered throughout, were former members of the ascendancy itself. This was perhaps the most remarkable thing of all. When the Empire fell, humanity had not demanded vengeance against the species that had oppressed them. They had not burned the Dreenix homeworld or enslaved the populations that had once ruled them. Instead, they had offered a choice: join us or go your own way. Many had expected slaughter. Many had prepared for extinction. When it did not come, they did not understand. A young Dreenix diplomat approached Tanaka before the ceremony began. He was barely an adult by his species' standards, born after the war had started. He had never known the old empire, only its fall. "I do not understand humans," he said. His voice was hesitant, uncertain. "My grandfather was a governor under the Ascendancy. He ordered the deaths of thousands of your people. When we surrendered, your soldiers treated us with kindness. Why? You had every right to destroy us." Tanaka considered the question carefully before answering. "Because destruction was not the point," she said. "Revenge was not the point. The Ascendancy was built on the idea that some species are superior to others, that the strong have the right to rule the weak, to use them, to crush them. We did not fight to replace one empire with another. We fought to end that idea forever." She looked around the room at the gathered species. "Every being in this room has suffered. Every species has been hurt. If we let that pain turn into hatred, we become what we fought against. The cycle continues. The only way to break it is to choose something different." The young Drenix was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, not in submission but in respect. "I think I am beginning to understand," he said. The ceremony began an hour later. Tanaka stood at the podium, looking out at the faces of 37 species. Behind her, a document was displayed on screens in 100 languages, the Charter of the Terran Alliance. The name had been debated for months. Some had wanted to call it the Galactic Federation, or the United Worlds, or something that did not include a reference to humanity's home planet. But in the end, the allied species had insisted. Humanity had started this. Humanity had shown them that freedom was possible. The least they could do was honor that in the name. 900 years ago, Tanaka began, my ancestors signed a treaty because they had no choice. They were weak, and the galaxy was dangerous, and they did what they had to do to survive. I do not blame them for that. They gave us time, time to grow, time to learn, time to become what we needed to become. She paused. But survival is not enough. Existing is not enough. Every species in this room has dreams and hopes and potential that goes beyond merely staying alive. The Ascendancy tried to crush that. They wanted obedience. They wanted submission. They wanted the galaxy to kneel. Her voice grew stronger. We said no. Together we said no. And today we say something more. We say that from this day forward, no species will be forced to kneel. No world will be conquered for resources or glory. No being will be born into slavery or told that their life is worth less than another's. She lifted a pen, an old-fashioned writing instrument chosen deliberately for its symbolism. This charter does not create an empire. It does not establish rulers or subjects. It creates a partnership, a promise between species that we will stand together against any who threaten our freedom, that we will help each other grow and prosper, that we will settle our disputes with words instead of weapons. She looked around the room. There will be challenges ahead. We come from different worlds with different cultures and different histories. We will disagree. We will argue. We will sometimes fail to understand each other. That is natural. That is expected. But as long as we keep talking, as long as we keep trying, as long as we remember why we fought and what we fought for, we will find our way. She signed the charter with a steady hand. One by one, the representatives of 37 species came forward to add their own signatures. Velith and Drenix, Crix and Morath, beings of flesh and beings of energy, former slaves and former masters. Each signature was a promise. Each name was a commitment. When the last signature was complete, the room fell silent. Then someone started clapping. It was a human custom that had spread during the war, a way of showing appreciation and joy. Other species had adopted it, and soon the entire room was filled with applause that sounded like thunder. Tanaka watched with tears in her eyes. She thought of all the people who had died to make this moment possible, human and alien, soldiers and civilians, beings who had given everything for a future they would never see. She wished they could be here. She wished they could see what their sacrifice had built. Later that evening, After the ceremony, Tanaka walked alone through the streets of Geneva. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, she could see ships lifting off from the spaceport, carrying delegates back to their homeworlds with copies of the charter. A voice spoke from behind her. "You know this is not the end." She turned. Shara of the Velith stood there, her silver skin glowing in the fading light. "I know," Tanaka said. "There will be species who reject the charter. There will be tyrants who try to build new empires. There will be wars and crises and challenges we cannot imagine. And humanity will face them." Tanaka shook her head. "No, we will face them, all of us together. That is the point, is it not? Humanity showed the galaxy that standing up was possible, but we cannot build the future alone. No one can." Shara smiled, a gesture she had learned from humans during the war. "The Velith have a saying," she said. "One voice is a whisper, many voices are a storm. For 8,000 years we whispered in the darkness. Now we speak freely. That is your gift to us. And what will you do with that gift?" Shara looked up at the stars that were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Everything," she said. "We will do everything we were never allowed to do. We will explore and create and dream. We will make mistakes and learn from them. We will become what we were always capable of becoming." She looked at Tanaka. "That is what you gave us, not victory, not revenge. Hope, the belief that tomorrow can be better than today." Tanaka stood in silence for a long moment, looking at the stars her species had reached toward for so long. So many worlds out there, so many species, so many possibilities. 900 years ago, humanity had signed a treaty that forced them to kneel. Today, they had helped create something that would let everyone stand tall. "Hope," she said quietly. "Yes, that is the human gift. We have always believed that tomorrow could be better. Now the whole galaxy believes it too." She smiled, the same smile she had shown the High Arbiter all those years ago, with blood on her face and fire in her heart. "And we are only getting started." The stars shone down on a galaxy that was finally, truly free.